Welcome to Work Effectively with People with a Disability, Session 4, Cultural Considerations and Disability. In this session, we're going to be looking at how our skills and knowledge can be adapted and transferred to working with individuals who belong to culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, that is, COLD communities, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. We live in a very diverse country in terms of ethnicity and cultural background, and so as workers we really do need to have a sense of cultural awareness, sensitivity and cultural competence. So what is culture? Culture is about identity. Culture defines who we are, how we communicate, what we value and what is most important to us. Fostering cultural identity is always in the best interest of our clients. Cultural identity comes from having access to our culture, its institutions, land, language, knowledge, and social connections. As workers, we really do need to possess a high level of cultural awareness. And what this means is that workers need to have an understanding and awareness of the history, experience, culture, and rights of people who come from COLD backgrounds as well as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So our goal is to acquire as much knowledge about the particular culture that we're supporting or client with a disability and their culture. Cultural competence is much more than just having awareness of cultural differences. It's about our ability to understand, respect, communicate effectively with, and interact with people from across all different cultures. In the past, we've generally talked about being culturally tolerant. However, this has negative connotations, as if we need to tolerate people's differences. When embracing diversity, we then use language such as being culturally sensitive, and that aligns more easily with awareness of diversity. So in understanding the importance of cultural diversity and its existence in Australian communities, it then makes sense that we embrace a person-centered model when supporting our clients with a disability from COLD backgrounds or Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds. So we use things like person-centered planning, which focuses on the unique nature of the individual, their family and social context, and is far more suited to working with people from diverse backgrounds because we're wanting to understand their situation in a more holistic way than an individualistic way. Let's zoom in on COLD communities. So what we need to understand is the way in which COLD communities respond to their loved ones with disability or members of their community with disability is very different to westernized thinking. The main difference is that COLD communities tend to be more collectivist in nature versus individualistic. What this means is that there is a sense of responsibility and onus on the actual community and family of people with a disability from that community to be highly responsive. Versus individualistic is a more westernized concept in that the onus is on the individual to create their life and to make do with what they have and to do whatever possible to access resources and supports. For people with a disability from COLD communities, they tend to experience less social isolation and a higher level of support than non-Indigenous Australians and mainstream people. Within COL communities, one of the barriers experienced is that there's a lack of bilingual staff in the area of disability. And so this creates barriers in terms of being able to access certain supports and to negotiate or advocate for those supports. The demand for services from culturally diverse groups is lower than mainstream communities, but there seems to be a lack of access to outreach supports, which places greater pressure on COLD families to meet the needs of people within their community and loved ones. So because of the individualistic nature of Australian mainstream society, there tends to be more pressure on disability services coming from people from non-COLD communities. Let's look at the issues around disability for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. We know that physical disability is the most common type of disability group amongst Indigenous Australians, with severe or profound core activity limitations. Among Indigenous Australians aged 15 to 64, they were found to have severe or profound disability. 82% experience physical disability. So that is people who use wheelchairs due to paraplegia or quadriplegia. There's sight, hearing and speech related disabilities that are more prevalent at 42% among those with severe or profound core activity limitations. Despite the higher prevalence of disability amongst Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, the rate of specialist services used amongst Indigenous Australians is pretty similar to that of non-Indigenous people. Now, this is surprising. We would expect that because there is higher prevalence, you would imagine that more funding and resources would be allocated to our Indigenous communities, but that's not the case. We need to understand, in terms of being culturally sensitive, that some Aboriginal people still hold, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people still hold cultural and mythological beliefs about the reasons for a disability. It's important for service providers and for us as workers to be aware of this and to be willing to have really open conversations with our clients about their perception of disability and the impact on themselves and loved ones. Aboriginal families consider themselves to be more accepting and supportive of family members who have a disability than non-Aboriginal people. And again, that links back to our earlier discussion around collectivist cultures versus individualistic cultures. We know that kinship is a priority and a fundamental value for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and kinship is about the level of attachment and responsibility that is shared amongst community and extended family for loved ones, versus westernized thinking, which is very individual. You belong to your nuclear family, and generally there is a lack of extended support, and that is a general statement that I'm making. In terms of looking at barriers to service delivery and provision, it's reasonable to understand that based on historical factors, Indigenous communities or people with a disability within Indigenous Australia experience a mistrust of structured and formal systems. So this reduces the likelihood of them accessing service providers. There's also communication issues. There's a problem with a shortage of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander staff in the disability sector. Location. We know that many of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities live in remote or rural areas of Australia, and so equity and access issues become barriers. And also bureaucracy really hinders the process of accessing services in a very straightforward way. There's eligibility processes, and this can often deter people from even applying for services because it's so labour intensive and not user friendly. So what are the implications for those services that want to be culturally responsive, and also for us as workers? Well, we need to be willing to fully embrace diversity and to see it as something that value adds to our society. This means that we need to be highly reflective in our practice, to be willing to challenge our own personal biases and to suspend judgments, to not collude with the conditioning that we've had around disability being viewed as negative, a burden on society, etc. All of the stereotypes. We need to be willing to challenge that. We need to embrace empowerment and person-centered models because they've been demonstrated to help in facilitating full participation in community by people with a disability from diverse backgrounds. And we also need to see more staff with cold backgrounds and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds employed in disability services because they bring with them an internalized understanding, a deep understanding of what clients need to be able to reach their potential. So this has just been a very brief overview, but I hope that it's given you some information to ponder on, particularly around your own values with regards to diversity and working with people with a disability from a cold background or Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community. Thanks for listening.